question for Robert Rainville, but it can go to everyone. There's been a lot of criticism, not enough corruption prosecution coming out of the Attorney General's office, that seemingly it all comes from the federal prosecutor's office. I'll ask you, and we'll run right down the group here. Will we see more corruption, state corruption cases coming out of our state Attorney General's office?
Well, if the Attorney General Rainville is there, you will see plenty more state corruption investigations and prosecutions. For far too long, it has been put off to the federal level with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Certainly, we need to work together with them. But I wanted to go back to something Kevin said. I don't believe there's anything wrong with politics in general, but in the Attorney General's office, there certainly is. Mr. Kilmartin has been involved in politics, and I think he's, a fine enough gentleman, and I've known him for several years. He's not running for the correct office. Anyone that is involved in any political party, Republican, Democrat, or even trying to create a party, moderate, cannot run for Attorney General. It's very clear. There's no politics involved in this office. So again, if Mr. Kilmartin were running for another seat in another race somewhere else, that's fine, but not for Attorney General. I would work and have much more proactive investigations and not put them off to the federal authorities, because we need to have someone in the Attorney General's office who is working actively in investigating these crimes. As an independent, I will be free from the shackles of political obligations and make those state investigations.
Christopher Little.
Indeed. We already have a provision in our Code of Ethics which provides that it's a misdemeanor if a politician intentionally misstates something on a disclosure, such as getting a furnace at a discounted price. If that was referred to the AG's office, nothing happened. Now, I think we talked a little bit about here in response to what Representative Kilmartin was saying or alluding to earlier about contributions. I gave a press release indicating that, and this is one of the problems with our system, that I gave a contribution to an up-and-coming politician who was doing things different in Central Falls 5 years ago. And
Got to stop you right there. Kevin McKenna.
People don't understand what corruption's about. We have a multi-billion-dollar state government. The Attorney General has got 180 staff people. The government is like 15,000 employees, and then multiply that times 39 local governments. The Ethics Commission is failing us. They need to have an individual prosecutor. They need to have an individual hearing officer, and the General Assembly doesn't have to control it. If you had that, that would help stop. If you had anti-corruption certificates, that would help it.
Eric Wallen.
One of the main reasons why I stepped into this race was my desire to crack down on public corruption. I proposed having a public corruption unit 18 months ago, before the Johnston landfill, before North Providence, before Central Falls. It's a key issue for both economic development as well as for the trust of the people of Rhode Island. I'll have a public corruption unit. I've also proposed a 24-page public corruption bill which does not rely upon theft of honest services as Mr. Kilmartin's does, Representative Kilmartin's, which was eviscerated by the United States Supreme Court in the Skilling case.
Peter Kilmartin.
Thank you. First, I get a kick out of everybody here saying about politics and politicians. All 5 of us have run for office in the past. Only 2 of us have been successful. The second part of this is, and I might as well announce it here, right now the Attorney General's office has only 3 subdivisions that are required statutorily. I want to make a public corruptions unit a permanent part of state law, so every Attorney General, beginning with me and moving forward, has to address that issue.
Arlene Violet, a question for Mr. Little, please.
Mr. Little, the Attorney General is the attorney for the people, but also in the civil division for state agencies, particularly when the constitutionality of a statute is challenged. Back in Mr. McKenna's days with Julie Michelson, as well as in the mid-'80s, the civil division was 1/3 the size it is today, but yet the state agencies are hiring left and right attorneys as private attorneys. The governor, for example, hired someone to fight the Narragansett Casino Act or to challenge the appointment of the receivership. Do you see that as an evisceration of the civil responsibilities of the Attorney General, and what would you do to stop this outsourcing to private attorneys at a cost of millions of dollars, those responsibilities the Attorney General used to do?
absolutely. When we take, for example, recently under the Director of Administration who tried to refer tax collection cases to the Attorney General and was turned down. That's just ridiculous. You're supposed to be the chief legal officer for the state. And as I've said before in a paper that I issued dealing with restructuring the office, I'm satisfied that there are ample resources, but we have this silo mentality that people work and say, that's my only unit. That's one of the problems when you say, let's have a public corruption unit. You get people, we need to have people working across lines. We need to have the resources dedicated, but we need to have them working across lines. And the civil area is a very good example of that, where people, there's some very good people, but they say, this is the only thing I do. Instead of being mobilized where the needs are, where the priorities are to serve this community, particularly as there will be more demands on this office, without a doubt we should be doing that.
Kevin McKenna.
The answer's simple. You're the Attorney General. You do not let any other agency, person represent the state in the courtroom proceedings. Whether they got staff or not, the Attorney General is the Attorney General for all the people. Second thing, some of the state agencies are corrupted. Some of them are acting outside of the Constitution. The Attorney General may have to sue them. If they get sued individually, they can hire their own attorney. Otherwise, they can't.
Eric Wallman, thank you. Eric.
As Attorney General, I look forward to sitting down with whoever is elected the next governor, whether it's a Republican, a Democrat, a moderate, or an independent. And I will speak to that person and ask that, in fact, they look at consolidating legal resources into the Attorney General's civil division. It's an important part of the job. There's no question about it. You know, one place we could certainly cut is the $2 million that the part-time General Assembly spends on part-time legal counsel. $2 million. And that doesn't include the family health benefits that they get as well.
Thank you. Representative Kimura.
Thank you. I actually put in a bill to stop those health benefits for part-time attorneys. The other point is, I agree with Kevin. I would go in and I would stop the executive branch from using out attorneys other than the Attorney General's office in courtroom proceedings. The other thing, I plan on taking on the PUC. There's a letter on the governor's desk right now from the PUC saying, give us 3 attorneys. I don't want the Attorney General's attorneys. That's an outrage. Those attorneys are in the PUC working for the Attorney General's office, keeping an eye on the PUC. I am going to fight to keep them there and not let the PUC take those positions.
Mr. Rainville.
People of Rhode Island, don't you see what the problem is happening here? There's differences of political ideologies, whether it's in the executive branch of the Attorney General's office. We cannot have decisions of the Attorney General being looked at through political eyes. And that's why all of a sudden outside counsel is being hired. We need to have an Attorney General who's going to make the decisions for the people and do it inside, in-house, in the civil division. You know, and I just want to go back. Mr. Wallen talks about public corruption before over there. He should have the courage of his convictions. He bashes the current administration constantly as an angry Republican. Why don't you? He worked there for 5 years, not 5 days or 5 weeks.
Thanks,
5 years.
Thanks,
he should
Mr.
have resigned.
My colleague Jim Hummel, a question for Kevin McKenna.
Mr. McKenna, I've been covering courts an awfully long time. I covered the Scott Hornoff case back in the 90s, his conviction, and then ultimately somebody came forward. There was a case 20 years ago involving Steve Rosati, who was extradited to Florida, was coming very close to the electric chair, and then we found out later it was a false prosecution. And then there's a case now with Kimberly Mawson where somebody's coming forward, and that's still pending, so maybe we don't want to comment on that. Is it ever appropriate, or should it be appropriate or expected for the Attorney General to step forward in those cases where people have been exonerated and simply say, we're sorry?
Not only should they say they're sorry, they should make sure that person is compensated. Your civil rights insist that you're not convicted on false evidence. U.S. v. Brady, the Maryland case, Maryland versus Brady, says you cannot. The Attorney General has a constitutional responsibility to reveal exculpating evidence, got my braces on, to the defense counsel. We're not out there. I disagree with some people that we're out there to hang everybody. We're out there to give a fair trial.
Let me be clear. In the Hornoff case, it's a little different. There was clearly circumstantial evidence. The jury reached a proper verdict. But at the end of the day, a guy spent 5 years in jail. There was never any, we're really sorry you had to go through this. Do you think it would have been appropriate for somebody to step forward and say that in the Scott Hornoff case?
Absolutely. And it's also been a problem in the famous death of 100 people. I think West Warwick should have been relooked at in that case.
Mr. Wallen.
As someone who has not only been a prosecutor, but also during my career in the Air Force, I served as a defense counsel as well. I've become very conscious of the fact that not everybody accused of a crime or even initially charged with a crime ultimately is the one who committed it. And as Attorney General, that perhaps is one of the most sacred things that you have to keep in your mind. I certainly did as a line prosecutor in that office, that whenever information comes forward that suggests that you might not have the right person, it is your absolute duty to come forward and after the fact to apologize if it got wrong.
Mr. Camarton.
It's nothing that I haven't done as a police officer. You evaluate the evidence before you, and you make a determination. You need to have the strength, as either a police officer or the Attorney General, to prosecute when you have enough evidence to do so, and when you don't, to not prosecute. In that case you're referring, the Hornoff case, tragedy. Just like the Waters case that the movie is just about to be come out with now, conviction. That's the least the state could do and the Attorney General could do, is to apologize to those people.
Mr. Rainville.
It's amazing to me that not one candidate here utters the words, "You're supposed to seek justice" as the Attorney General. This is not about getting prosecutions. You prosecute when the evidence is there to convict. But the office's charge is to seek justice. Obviously, Mr. Wallen lost sight of that. It seems like he wants to prosecute everyone, going after Democrats constantly. You need to look at the law and the facts. And if there's a situation where someone was wrongfully convicted, absolutely an apology goes out there. It's happened now even in healthcare more, where doctors would apologize if there was a wrongful situation. So,
Mr. Little.
The answer is yes, Jim. I think one of the things that's a little troublesome to me, though, is looking at recent days. We have problems here with a lot of cases ending in a judgment for acquittal. For example, in Washington County Superior Court, 8 cases this year alone, which raises a question in my mind of why are these cases being tried? Why are we putting the resources into this? Is it an issue of case management? Is it an issue of needing additional supervision in the criminal prosecutors? I'm not sure what the answer is, but I think this kind of question of deciding where we try and when we try, we need to be looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Little.